We've got breaking Chinese trade news, and no, it's not good for Canada. Let's go. Welcome back to Bakes on Things. Today, the United States and China have shook hands, and now that leaves Carney out in the cold again. They just rolled back hundreds of billions in tariffs and opened the floodgates on global trade again. Why couldn't Canada do this as well? It's a 90-day plan with China to negotiate a new trade deal. What do we have? Nothing. But the U.S. is back in business, China is back in business, and Canada, well, we just got locked out of another deal. And we are in big, big trade trouble. We are in real trouble here, Canada. This is a trade disaster. Why could Mark Carney not have come up with a 90-day plan like this one in order to negotiate a new deal? Well, he was with Donald Trump last week. This is a diplomatic failure, and it's being buried by our media as some sort of great story for the US and China, but nothing happened here really. Because when Trump and Xi Jinping are getting a deal done, our Prime Minister Mark Carney is missing in action again. So today, let's break this all down. This, Canada, is our wake-up call. But the problem is the Liberals continue to re-review, and I'm not sure it's just the Liberals, so I won't give it that, but the Elections Canada continues to review seats, and the Liberals are getting closer to a majority. But here's the deal that changed everything, because this is huge. All right, so here's what happened. If you haven't seen it yet on some of the news sites, go and read the American news sites. Don't support the Canadian ones. They're all twisting it around. The U.S. and China signed a surprise 90-day tariff rollback agreement today. Now, what are the details of this? Well, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods were at 145%. They are now dropped to just 30%. Chinese tariffs on U.S. goods were cut from 125% to 10%. This is massive, and the stock markets are reacting. In fact, they've shot up today. Shipping indexes recovered entirely almost. Agriculture prices stabilized. Manufacturers are cheering. This deal signals a reopening of two of the world's largest economies. And Canada, as the U.S.'s big customer, again, out in the cold. Now, it's great news for the U.S. It's smart strategy for China. So from that perspective, it's phenomenal. But it's an absolute nightmare for Canada. Now, let's talk about how this hurts Canada, because it's not just the fact that the U.S. and Donald Trump didn't find a way to pause tariffs last week with Mark Carney in order to strike some sort of similar deal, but it's also because of how we're dealing with China. Because here's the thing, while America and China are shaking hands, China is still punching Canada in the gut. Because we are much smaller as an economy than the United States, the Chinese tariffs on us right now are far more impactful. And we, in March, got slapped by China with 100% tariffs on our canola, on our peas, on our lentils, everything basically with regard to agriculture, 25% on pork and seafood, delays and bans on beef and even maple syrup. But we can't handle this as an economy. This strikes our economy way harder. And why did they do this? Because we, under the Carney Liberals, tried to stand up to China with tariffs of our own. We can't do that. Without U.S. support and without leverage, it backfired badly. We aren't in an economic position to make these kind of moves, and now we're paying for it. And now the U.S. just made some sort of peace with China. And I know liberals will jump into the comments and say, this is only for 90 days. They'll screw something up. Trump's an idiot, blah, 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 blah. But regardless of that, we're left holding the bag. And for the next 90 days, our economy is frozen. Where is Mark Carney in all of this? Where is our prime minister? because this is starting to get out of hand. He's the one who said Canada would lead the world in sustainable trade. We would put carbon pricing on everything so that we could trade with other economies that only accept carbon pricing, even though now the US has signed a deal or at least an expression of interest with the UK and has no carbon pricing. He said we'd break our dependence on the US, but here the US is dealing with China. He said we'd stand up to China and thrive, but instead, no new trade deals, no new trade talks, no new trade pauses, no tariff relief, no major foreign investment wins, no strategy since he became prime minister a few weeks ago. But he is giving speeches from time to time, and he is getting very angry when you ask him questions, especially if you're a female. He's going to summits. That's a thing. But he's not delivering. He's a figurehead, and the Liberals have always made their prime minister figureheads while they sit here and botch the economy in the background. So, what is the real cost to you as Canadians? Because this is a big deal. This is a huge deal for the U.S. and the U.S. podcasts and the Chinese podcasts, if they're allowed to have them, are going to discuss this at length, but they aren't going to include Canada. So that's what we're here for. Because this isn't just about politics. This is about your paycheck, Canada. This is about your grocery bill. This is about your retirement. See, prairie farmers are dumping crops that should have gone to China. These crops are not going anywhere. Ontario manufacturers are losing out to American competitors right now, and it's continuing to get worse. Fisheries in the Maritimes. Remember the fishermen who were so boldly protesting against Mark Carney during the campaign? There was a reason for that, because fisheries in the Maritimes are laying off workers. And Alberta's energy sector, well, they're trying to separate now because of all of this. Still boxed out by US and China regulation games, and there's no prime minister helping with that. This trade disaster will cost Canadian businesses billions. And by the way, until the 27th of this month, we don't even have a parliament. And for you, expect higher prices, fewer jobs, and slower growth. Nobody's stepping in, nobody's doing anything. Carney's promises are already broken. This has to be record pace for a prime minister breaking their promises from a campaign. And yet here we are, still counting votes and seats flipping to the Liberals to the point where we could see a majority. Remember when Carney said he'd modernize our trade? That he'd built resilience, or he would build resilience, I should say, and open up new markets? Well, that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. He hasn't signed, which Carney himself has not signed one major bilateral deal since taking office, and the U.S. continues to do so. He let the U.S. freeze us out of their China strategy, and now here they are with a brand new deal with a rollback of tariffs that do not include Canada's tariffs. He let China crush our ag sector with no backup plan. Donald Trump's getting upset because now he's seeing the footage of Mark Carney bashing him after they just shook hands. And now the Americans are selling soybeans, beef, and rare earths to China, tariff free or at a significant reduction, while our exporters are left to rot. Canada didn't just lose a trade war. We didn't even get invited to the peace talks in this trade war, and now here we sit, complaining, bumbling, elbows up at Donald Trump when Donald Trump is making the world work again. I don't like Donald Trump, okay? I do not. But he's getting things done, and Mark Carney is not, because all we're doing is crying like babies about how we don't like the orange man to the south, and now we keep losing. So let's ask the tough question. Did we make a mistake voting in the Liberals again? Obviously, this is a conservative show, so I want to ask Liberals this question. Do you feel like you made a mistake? Because it sure looks like you did. This is what we've got here so far. A prime minister with no trade wins. A government still obsessed with optics over outcomes, especially when it comes to Donald Trump. Let's keep banging the table. Let's keep talking about how he's a meanie. And a country being economically strangled now by our two biggest trading partners because of this rhetoric. We made a massive, massive mistake. We're not a middle power anymore. We're a no power. We're a middle manager waiting for orders from Beijing and from Washington, because we now can't do anything because all we did was complain. All we did was insult Donald Trump and China, and now here we are. We are being pushed out of the global economy in real time, literally on the daily. And nobody in Carney's cabinet seems to have noticed or care about any of this. Because again, the louder we get, the more the seniors support us. The louder and more complaining we do, the more that our liberal supporters with their fingers and their elbows up support us. But we're not winning. We're losing. And we're losing badly. So what's next? Higher tariffs on Canadian food, energy, and metals. Delays in our exports will now increase even more. Lower investor confidence in this country. Our country's credit rating will take a massive hit. We will see a weaker dollar and rising debt with no new revenue streams. Why no new revenue streams? Because the two biggest powers just made a huge deal. Because here's the truth. Canada is now uncompetitive. We are not becoming uncompetitive. We are uncompetitive. We're overregulated, undertraded, overtaxed, and underleveraged. And this was what Pierre Poilievre was saying the entire time. And you, liberal folks, made a massive, massive mistake. And if this government doesn't course correct fast, we're not heading into a recession. We're heading into permanent irrelevance. Let that sink in, because that's the truth. So the question becomes, what can we do as the Liberals hurtle towards a majority government through recounts? What can we as citizens do? Because it's not over yet. We still have citizen power here. Here's what you can do right now. Demand answers from your MP. Where is the trade plan? Especially if it's a Liberal MP. Support Canadian exporters. Yes, we can buy Canadian still. And yes, we need to do this not to fight the orange man from the south, but to support our own people, which is what Pierre was going to do. Push local products, what Pierre was going to do. Call out the media, what Pierre was doing. Why aren't they covering this? Vote smarter. Well, we can't do that now, right? Don't vote on a resume. Too late now. But what you also can do is you can share this video, because if we don't speak up, no one else will. So let's close this out. This breaking news was huge today. It's devastating for Canada. The U.S. just secured their future. And yes, I get that the pause is just for 90 days currently, but that gives them a full 3 months to negotiate a brand new trade deal. And Mark Carney was in the U.S. last week and could have negotiated this 90-day pause as well. And China just secured their dominance because Mark Carney didn't do that. And Canada, now we're stuck with a leader who can't get us a seat at the table, let alone negotiate a new deal. There's not much we can do now in terms of an electoral process, but it's time to stop being polite. Time to stop being ignored. Get on the phone, get on the emails with your MPs. Time to fight for Canada's place in the world again. Time to push the Liberal government forward if we have to do it ourselves. Because if we don't, we're not just losing trade, we're losing our sovereignty. Exactly what Mark Carney promised we would never lose. But now we have. Like, share, subscribe, and let's tell Ottawa that we didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for the silence we are seeing. We didn't vote for the clasped hands, and we didn't vote for the kissing of the ring, which Mark Carney, of course, told us he wouldn't do and then did the moment he met Trump. We voted for strength. At least I did. But unfortunately, that candidate didn't win. Thanks for watching.